الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر. استغفر الله. استغفر الله. استغفر الله. استغفر الله. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم إنا نسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى. اللهم استر عوراتنا وآمن روعاتنا. اللهم حاسبنا حسابا يسيرا. اللهم أجرنا من مضلات الفتن ما أحييتنا. اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك. أغننا بفضلك عمن سواك. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحور الأعداء والجبابرة. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحور الأعداء والجبابرة. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم اجعل سريرتنا خيرا من علانيتنا، واجعل علانيتنا صالحة. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. صل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. سلام على المرسلين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Inshallah, tafsir will take place. ठीक है, वैसे कहाँ बिछाएंगे? लेट हो गया ना, रहने दे वैसे ही. الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واتل عليهم نبأ الذي آتيناه آياتنا فانسلخ منها فأتبعه الشيطان فكان من الغاوين ولو شئنا لرفعناه بها ولكنه أخلد إلى الأرض واتبع هواه فمثله كمثل الكلب إن تحمل عليه يلهث أو تتركه يلهث ذلك مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا فقصص القصص لعلهم يتفكرون ساء مثلا القوم الذين كذبوا بآياتنا وأنفسهم كانوا يظلمون صدق الله العظيم لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Respected brothers, elders and sisters in Islam, these are the ayat from the surah known as Al-A'raf. We discussed a few parables from Surah Al-An'am previously, and the next parable that is found in the Quran, at least the powerful one and the remarkable one, is this, which is in Surah Al-A'raf. And the ayat that I have recited before you are ayat number 175, 176, and 177. The parable that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cites in this ayat is actually a historic account from one of the people of Bani Israel, the nation that preceded as the followers of Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. We in fact find in the ahadith of Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam that he encouraged us to cite and mention the examples and the parables of the people of Bani Israel, as they offer immense benefits and many lessons for us, many lessons to learn from. And therefore we find even in the Quran the story, in fact the most repeated story in the Holy Quran is the story of Musa alayhi salam and his people. That is the most repeated and reminded story in the Quran, because Murad Abdul Majid Daryabadi rahimahullah, in his tafsir, or rather in one of his writings, he drew the parallels between Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Muslims versus Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his people. Many things correlate and are common in between. Therefore Allah mentioned his story a lot more frequently in the Quran. So this is among those places that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions as an example for us all to reflect and learn lessons from. And this example exclusively, and I address myself first and foremost, may Allah protect one and all, that this example that we have is the example directly relates to the scholars, the religious figures. And the parable that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned is the harshest, perhaps, arguably, in terms of its analogy and example of all the other parables found in the Quran. The connection and the linking of a person of knowledge, a person of religiosity, linking to something as low as this one. And therefore this is seen as the perhaps most harsh, the harshest of parables mentioned in the Quran. Why and how is this? It is seen as such because Allah linked a person of caliber, a person of maqam and ilm to a dog. And we know in general language, dog is always used as a derogatory remark and an insult to mention anyone as dog or to give an example of dog to someone. And so never mind a person of, like I said, ilm, a person of nobility, a person of religiosity. So two opposing ends. In one hand, this person who possesses such a quality. On the other hand, the parable that Allah mentioned about him is the one that is very, very demeaned animal from all the animal kingdom, as ulama they said. So why and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relates this example to this person? It is interesting. And therefore, the translation of these ayat will explain a bit for us, and then inshallah the rest of the explanation will follow. Like I said, Rasulullah himself often encouraged us to mention the examples of Bani Israel, and in this ayat, in this passage, in fact, Allah commands Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, commands him to recite and recount the sad story of a person that belonged to Bani Israel. Watlu alayhim, relate to them. Watlu alayhim, recite unto them, naba'a, the news, the information, alladhi ataynahu, of the one whom we gave our signs. Ataynahu ayatina. Allah commanded Rasulullah to relate this particular story to people, and this individual, Allah considers him first in the beginning of this parable passage, is the one that we blessed him with our signs, blessed him with ayat. What does this ayat refer to over here? It refers to the knowledge of the book. For example, Torah, because he was the scholar of this tradition. He was the person who had this inside knowledge of the religion. And then فَانْسَلَخَ مِنْهَا, and then he peeled himself out of that. Salakha means something to peel off. So despite being given this ilm, this maqam, he got out of that. فَانْسَلَخَ مِنْهَا, he sneaked from that. And فَأَتْبَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانِ, and shaitan took over this person. Shaitan took over this person. فَأَتْبَعَهُ الشَّيْطَانِ فَكَانَ مِنَ الْغَابِينَ, hence he was among those who were deviant, misguided and lost. He became among those who got lost. And then وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَرَفَعْنَاهُ بِهَا, had we willed and wanted, we could have raised him and raised his maqam and rank. Biha, bi ayatina, bi ayat, the ayat that Allah blessed him with, they were the source of elevation of his rank in the eyes of Allah, essentially, when Allah gave him that. But obviously because of his wrongdoings, because of his own actions, he lowered himself. وَرَفَعْنَاهُ بِهَا وَلَكِنَّهُ أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ, but he clung to the life of this earth. He clung to the life of this earth, inclined towards the materialism and the dunya and the temptations of dunya and the pleasures of dunya. Astaghfirullah. وَأَتْبَعَ هَوَاهُ, and he did that in the pursuit of his desires. وَأَتْبَعَ هَوَاهُ. So Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi rahimahullah ta'ala says that among the most destructive things in the life of a person is to follow the desires. And therefore in one of the ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions of a person, أَفَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ. There are people, Allah says, that they have taken their whims and desires as God. Literally they honor and submit and follow through their desires like the one who is supposed to follow the orders of Allah. They are that much they are that much into their desires. فَأَتْبَعَ هَوَاهُ. So this person clung to the life of the earth in the pursuit of desire. whether it is one particular type or kind, but all different forms and types are seen the same. وَأَتْبَعَ هَوَاهُ فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ. So then here the actual parable begins. Here the actual parable begins. فَأَتْبَعَ هَوَاهُ. Allah says, فَمَثَلُهُ. So the example of this individual, who has clung to the life of this earth and pursued and followed the desire, etc., is the example of a dog. فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ. Is the example of a dog. And this is not just a dog like a dog. But then Allah, to worsen the condition, mentions and links this individual to the dog that is always panting. That we all can recall this and relate, and that is that we see some dogs that their tongue is always hanging below and always in the state of heavy breathing. Whether they are running, sitting, regardless, they are constantly in the state of panting. So فَمَثَلُهُ كَمَثَلِ الْكَلْبِ إِنْ تَحْمِلْ عَلَيْهِ يَلْهَثْ. If you chase this dog away, as you chase the dog away, it will pant, and تَتْرُكُ يَلْهَث. And even if you leave the dog, still it will pant, regardless of the condition. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ مَثَلُ الْقَوْمِ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. This is the masal of people, قوم الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. Those who have denied our ayat, rejected our ayat. And then فَقْصُصِ الْقَصَصَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So narrate qasas, stories like this, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, so that they ponder, reflect and think. Because human beings, one of the beautiful and important faculties that Allah has blessed us with is our rationality, our brain. It is this brain that helps us to choose the right and avoid the wrong. And because human beings are always after the masalih and benefit. So if you are interested in the benefits, that what could be a greater benefit than to save yourself from the punishment of Allah, from the disobedience of Allah, and the fire of Jahannam in the hereafter. So all of this is in the interest of human being and benefit of human being. But because he doesn't think deeply or is very much obsessed with certain types of traits, certain types of behavior, certain types of qualities, and therefore he ignores the greater benefits, which is of course religion and morality and other things. So this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Now, who this person was that Allah refers to in these ayat, right? The example we heard, Allah links this individual to the example of a dog, the panting dog rather. And so who this person was, so this was a true story. This is a true story that Quran mentions. Right? Anything that the Quran speaks, it's really real. But this story is also definitely among the stories that have immense lessons to draw from. So, as I said, there was a person from from Bani Israel, from people of Israelite, children of Israel, and he was in the time of Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. In the time of Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. And the name of this individual was Bal'am bin Ba'ura, as the scholars of tafsir have stated. So ulama, they have presented different possibilities who this person could be and what exactly he did to have this very harsh description and example being linked to him. So first and foremost, he was one of the persons from Bani Israel, and he lived in the time of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. When it is important for us to understand the presence of Nabi is a great blessing in any time. Having the presence of Nabi and then having the honor to accept his message and commit and pay allegiance to and then rejecting is really very, very evil. Because first you had the honor to, this is why ulama they have stated, somebody who rejects Allah, or rather the message of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and him, after him, after the Nabi was gone, is not the same as the one who sees him and meets him and listens to him and yet rejects him. Because you have the personal experience with the Prophet. And that cannot be the same. That cannot be the same with the one who came after and then did not see the Prophet, just heard the message. Of course, they both in the consequences are the same because they both are the disbelievers. But one would be more serious than the other, because having the honor to see the Prophet and face him and listen to him, because the presence, the personality of the Prophet is like a power bank. Like it's like a power force. And even just, this is where ulama they said, sitting in the sohbah, in the companionship of the Prophet, just even for a second, for a minute, cannot equate the ibadat of decades. Why? Because you are in the presence of the power that generates the spirituality, that is a source of faith. So this individual who was from Bani Israel, who lived in the time and accepted the message, and after accepting and following the message and committing to it, then rejected it. Not directly, rather indirectly. And therefore, this example becomes very serious. So Bal'am bin Ba'ura was his name. So what exactly did he do to deserve this type of very, very evil description being attributed to him and to his personality? So the scholars of tafsir, as they explain, they're saying, of course, this person was blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have the knowledge of religion. He was given the knowledge of religion, and he had the knowledge of Torah, and which raised his rank in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of his religiosity, because of his knowledge. So Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, during his time, of course, there was opposing power and opposing force like Fir'aun and others. So the person who tempted him, there was one individual who tempted him to perpetrate evil. And this individual was actually a pagan king. It was a pagan king who tempted him by offering him power of wealth, position, and things like that. So he tried once, he refused. Basically trying to buy his religiosity, and in turn asking him for the support. Asking him for the support of this scholar. And because he knew, as Mufti Shujaat Ali in his tafsir Ma'arif al-Quran mentioned, that he knew a secret through which attracting the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Certain words like Al-Ism al-A'zam, the great name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is mentioned about that, if you call on to Allah using that name, Allah will answer your dua. So this king that was pagan, opposing Fir'aun, opposing Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and fighting him, so he knew this individual. So what did he do? He reached out to this religious figure and bribed him, basically, bribing him with wealth and power, etc., pleasures of dunya. So first time and second time and a few times he turned down. Said, no, I can't do. Then finally he succumbed to this temptation of the wealth and position and pleasure. So he succumbed to the temptation. And what did he do? After he succumbed to the temptation, so he joined in the force of this king that was pagan against the Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, against Musa alayhi salatu wasalam and his people. Just look at the evil of this individual. First accepting the message, being with him and on his side, then switching the sides from the best to the worst. Literally going to the pagan camp and the king that was fighting against the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And why do we do that? All of this, because of the temptations of dunya that really seduced him and pulled him in. So he gave in to all of it. This is what I said. So he followed through the desires. And so and then what did he do? So he disclosed that secret that he had, the Ismul Azam, through which a person can attract the rahmat of Allah subhanahu the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So now this individual king will use that to win the battle against the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was the worst part of this individual that he did. And Allah therefore used this as this story and this attitude, linking it to the canting dog because of the corrupt and evil nature of this individual, this religious figure in this story. Because God, when he hands, generally speaking, is as a result of the thirst, as a result of wanting something more. And this is their nature. And ulama say, one of the evil, there are certain positive things also in each and every makhluk of Allah, but one of the evil traits that this particular animal possesses is the greed. Never ending greed. Have you ever seen, especially in our countries, we see this quite common, and even here, dog has its own territory. So when any other dog gets closer to the territory, you right away see this dog barking, right? Not allowing the other dog to get in because of this greed. So this greed was also present, and the elements of that present in the life of this individual, because the dunya and all of those things that Allah referred to over here, hawahu. So that because of this greed, he sold his religion and traded, deen with dunya. What a worse trade was that. And this happened, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala therefore says, in tahmil alayhi yalhas aw tatruku yalhas. So whether you leave him alone or whether you chase him out, he is like that dog, because his goal and sole focus has become now dunya, has become the pleasures of dunya. Therefore he will be willing to do anything and everything for that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ مَثَلُ الْقَوْمِ الَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. This is the example of the people who, despite witnessing the truth, despite experiencing the Prophet, the presence of the Prophet, and also the khair that comes out of that, have the audacity to reject it, have the audacity to deny that, and turn their back. So as this individual bent his back over, as they say, bending his back over. This is what exactly the people who, despite witnessing the truth, do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala links them to this behavior. And فَقْصُصِ الْقَصَصَ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Allah says, narrate stories of this type and kind to people, so that لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ, so that they reflect and so that they learn and think. Now, a few lessons to learn from, and then inshallah as we come to the conclusion. Number one thing, my dear brothers and sisters, this powerful parable that we just discussed primarily addresses the elite class in the society, in the ummah, in any religious community. You know, each religious community has a group that is known as religious group, that is known the leaders, that are known the leaders and the scholars. So essentially it addresses them first. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in numerous hadiths, in fact, he warned, that scholar is the worst scholar that is, found at the doors of the sultan. That is found at the doors of the sultan. And that king is actually the best king who is found at the door of a scholar, because he comes to learn, he comes to benefit from the ilm of the scholar. But alim going to the kings and the presidents, in this context especially, will be seen, as Rasulullah said, the worst if he has ulterior and evil motives behind. And the hadith that we find that I want to share two hadiths in this regard. Prophet ﷺ mentioned in one hadith that my ummah, Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna akhwafa ma akhafu ala ummati." Among the things that I fear the most, for my ummah after I am gone. Among the things, inna akhwafa ma akhafu ala ummati min ba'di, after I am gone, is Rasul ﷺ said, "Al-immatul mudillun," the misguided ulama, the misguided imma, the leaders. It could be ulama, it could be leaders, whatever it may be, but they are the one who pose the greatest possible threat to them. Why? Because they collectively mislead people. Because it's not just one individual. Because each individual has a following. Right? So if one slips, then those who follow will also follow. This is the hadith that we find that shows us, that issues a stern warning. And the other, the quote that we have, it is from Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, about whom Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, if there were to be anyone to become the prophet after me, if there were to be any possibility of, Nabi the continuation of prophethood, then it would have been Umar radiallahu anhu to be chosen as the prophet of Allah. But since there is no prophethood continuity of the prophethood, therefore it didn't happen. But that shows the caliber of this Sahabi al-Jalil, the second rightly guided Khalifa. Right? So he said that in one of his aqwal, يهدم الإسلام ثلاث, says three things are very destructive to the religion of Islam in its entirety. Three things are very destructive, will be the source of demolition of Islam. It will cause great damage. It will cause great damage to Islam. So the first being, he said, zallatu alimin, the slip and the fault of a scholar. The slip and the fault of the alim, a scholar. And the second, he said, وَجِدَالُ مُنَافِقٍ بِالْقُرْآنِ, the arguments of a hypocrite over the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Munafiqeen, because as we discussed previously, they are out there to find any possible faults to prove religion evil, to prove religion not wrong. Let me put it this way. So they would do it indirectly. For example, like one of the things, if we have studied Orientalism, there was a whole class of Orientalism in 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, and until 19th one. So what did the Orientalists do? Because they had this hidden animosity towards Islam, but they sugar-coated their animosity and their hatred towards Islam and Muslims, in a beautiful way. How they would write books and they would praise, X, Y, Z things about Islam, and then suddenly they would bring something in that would confuse the reader, but it would be negative about Islam, would be negative about Prophet ﷺ, or negative about Quran. So 4 things positive, 2 things negative. So the goal would be, of course, it is not, of course, the best religion. That's what they would try to argue and present and prove. So the munafiqeen also argue over things of Quran and religion indirectly to drive people away from religion. And we discussed this before. And the third thing, what Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu did mention after this, first zallatu alim and the jidal of munafiq, and the third mu'a'immatu mudillun, and the misguided scholars. So these are the 3 figures and people, he said, are the source of great destruction to the religion. And indeed, because what the person can do the damage from within, from inside, no one can do similar damage from the outside. Because he knows the loopholes of that. Right? Somebody who is from inside, as we say, there is a saying, proverb in Urdu, Ghar ka bhedi lanka dhai, as they say. It's a Hindi proverb, which means somebody who knew the secrets of the house was the one to disclose it for the enemies to take over. So this becomes the case. So this is the first important point to learn from. And therefore, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, whatever ilm that we have been given, I address myself first and foremost with that, asking always Allah's protection, and guidance against misusing it for the petty reasons as Allah mentions in the Quran. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. This is number one point. And number two, what we also learn is, as this is primarily about the scholars and the elite, the community in the of the religious community, but each individual, as we all sit here, for example, we all have, some portion of dini knowledge. We all have some portion of religious ilm. Whatever it may be, whether it's 5%, 10%, we all have learned and read and studied. So in light of this parable, it is also equally important that we make sure that the knowledge that we have gained must not be abused by us. Must not be abused by us, whether it is by abandoning it or in worst case scenario, using it for worldly reasons. Using it for worldly reasons. Then a fraction of this parable will fit also on us. A fraction of this. Maybe, for example, somebody given the power to run an organization, to run a masjid, to run a charitable association. Now, the knowledge that he was given accordingly the position, and now abusing that power for the sake of XYZ benefits. Then this example and parable will also fit on that individual as well, because it was the knowledge and the power that they were given that made them slip this. And the third is, as this presents the example of the corrupt, immoral religious figures, and ulama, they have clearly stated, and I have quoted you the ahadith, that in our time there are several of this Bal'am Ba'ura type, religious figures in the Muslim Ummah of our time. And without going into details of that, the Muslim countries are, some of the Muslim countries are the example of that, because of the position, because of the lofty titles they've given. So the moment they especially enter in the political arena, it is from here that it starts to corrupt them. The moment somebody gets into the political arena, it starts to slowly but surely corrupt them, and they start to compromise their principles and start supporting things that are in favor of the rulers and the leaders and those who run the political show. And their knowledge is used to support them instead of guiding them. So there are many examples, and one of the worst example of that was in one of the Muslim countries that happened about 7 years ago. That there was a massive protest taking place, all over, and the protesters, they had even gone in the masjid and then continued the protest, of course in a very civilized manner, but this protest was against the government, the dictatorship of the government. So as the protest was taking heat and gaining the attention, media attention across the globe, so some of the such religious figures, to support the government, they said, even if government takes the step, the army, for example, in this case, takes the step going in the masjid and shooting people to death, it is okay to do so, to crush this whole protest. So you can imagine that masjid, as it is a sacred place, and Muslims are being killed, and this happened as a result. They were shot inside the masjid, and while some of them being engaged in perhaps in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's possible, because when you do open shooting, there could be all kinds of people sitting there. Right? So the misuse of ilm. And why did it happen? Because of getting into the political arena. And this is why classical, the traditional approach, which we all know, was that ulama, they had always kept themselves away from politics. And they never entertained. And even if they were to be forced, then they was completely rejected that. And Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam Malik rahimahullah, others, they were lashed, they were punished, and some of them were even given poison, simply because they did not stand on the side of the ruler. They did not support that. And it is mentioned about one of the scholars that one king, one of the rulers, one of the Umara of Egypt, he used to send a bag full of coins to one scholar each year, as a gift. So this scholar would receive it, 1 and 2 and 3, and it continued for a few times. And after few years, now this king, this Amir and Malik, needed the support of the scholar on one particular of his stands. So he asked the scholar, this is what I would like to do, and I would like you to support me. And the scholar said, this is Islamically incorrect, and I cannot support you, and I cannot stand with you, and cannot side with you. So right away, this king said to him, don't you forget that I gave you so many gifts all of these years. You did not have any issue accepting it. Now you have issue supporting me on this. So this scholar smiled, and he said, okay, wait. And he went inside. He went inside, and he came out with a bag which was a big bag, and then in front of him, he poured the bag which had all of those coins that he gifted him in the previous years. He said, did you think that I did not know I did not know your evil mentality behind these gifts? I already sensed that you would be using me one day. And therefore I did not even accept even one coin from this. And now here it is all what you gave me, and take it and get out of here. You cannot expect my support. So this is the ghira, al-ghira diniyya, that we, especially people of ilm, people of deen, to show. And there are many examples like this that we find. And last point that, my dear brothers and sisters, I want to leave you with a lesson to myself and all of us. As this whole episode that Quran mentions is a result of the temptation of dunya, the pleasures, the girls, power, position, etc. People we have seen and we continue to see, whether it is here or somewhere else, for the sake of this, are willing to do anything and everything. And we know some of those who previously run some countries, they kill their own spouses and children just because of the power that did not want to be shifted to them. And so we don't need to mention their names. So this is the temptation that Allah has warned us against in the Quran. So as we live in these days, in these times, and in societies like this, which is a purely material society, purely a commercial society, purely a consumer society, and it constantly promotes dunya, it constantly promotes supports rather the pleasures of dunya. So it is very important that we learn to stay strong and firm, on the principles of our deen, and never to compromise on anything, never to compromise on things that are absolutely serious about our Islam, absolutely serious. And I mentioned this before, that when some people ask me, mashallah, there are alhamdulillah brothers and sisters who want to practice their religion even in their workplace. So for example, they want to get the permission from their boss to pray Dhuhr Salat, or even to go to Jummah Salat, or even, for example, to wear hijab for sisters. So they asked me to provide a letter for them, that this is something very important for them, they should be doing. So whenever they have this situation, they said to me that, their boss says, if this is something so important for you in your religion, we also have other Muslims who don't really care about this. They never come to us, they never ask us, so why is it so important for you? So we are setting a bad example. We must not be among those people who give a negative image to people of our religion because of our own evil, and because of our own weakness of iman. And this is very serious. Therefore, at least we should be the people to acknowledge, yes, it is my fault and my weakness, not because of the religion. And that is at the essence of this discussion. We hope and pray that this serious example and parable that we discussed from the very beginning really opens our eyes and makes us realize the evil effect and the challenging temptations of dunya and the pleasures of dunya and the level of damage that it can bring to the person. And literally, like khasira dunya wal akhirah, dhalika huwa al-khusran al-mubin. Allah says, a person who trading deen with dunya, he is in the greatest loss, and there could not be a loss greater than that, Allah says. And we must make sure that we never go near, let alone falling into this ditch. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, and may Allah protect our iman And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us strong in our faith. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun ala al-mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.